Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in just a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other Friday to explore a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God of all.
We are back. We are back on the Mockingcast, ready to talk about all sorts of things, including college admission scandals and the poor and things you cannot say, among many other subjects, which I'm sure will come up. But before, as we like to always do, how on earth are you doing?
Good. I'm good. I have a new job. So, yeah.
Tell us what it is, Sarah. It's pretty cool.
So, I am the new chaplain, Episcopal chaplain for the University of Rice. Rice University? I need
Rice
to figure that out.
University.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Go Owls. I'm supposed to say that
you
now.
The mascot. Good job.
But yeah.
Go Sports.
Because the bishop emailed Go Owls to me, and I was like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, got it. Good. Okay, Owls. Yeah.
Sports. Yep.
Sports. Yes. We're doing it.
Well, congratulations, though,
you.
Sarah. I mean, it's very cool. I mean, hopefully,
super
I have a
excited.
feeling that there won't be any college admission scandals going on at Rice University.
Yeah, we'll see.
God willing.
Yeah,
Although
well, if
it's-
there are, I can pray him through it. That'll be my job. So
There you go. Reverend Condon on the job.
Yeah.
RJ, what do you have to say for yourself?
I'm great, man. Like, it's a perfectly beautiful day
It is.
in Houston, Texas. It's like 74, not a cloud in the sky. It's dry. I do not suffer from allergies, so I am happy. Cruising around, top down, listening to a little Chet Baker. The NCAA tournament started today.
Oh, boy.
So, you know,
Go Who's.
yeah.
Go Who's.
Go.
RJ, are you
Last
like
year.
pickled? Like, seriously, you don't have allergies? Like, can you just, what are your physical ailments? Like, I'm confused.
I've had my appendix out.
Someone on iTunes wrote a very encouraging review, which, by the way, if you haven't written a review on iTunes, please, that helps us out tremendously. But someone wrote, they were complimenting the cast, and they were talking about how Sarah is full of passion and verve, and then they say, and RJ's living the solution. I'd like, I guess, yes, RJ is living the solution.
Yeah, why don't you come spend a week in my house and then we'll talk, okay? Because
I love it.
Yeah, that is not. I mean, I'll say the night before last, I slept from 1:30 to 3:30 on the floor because my 2-year-old refused to get back in his bed. But he would sleep on the floor, which is probably why my back hurts.
Oh, no.
So, yeah. There you
So
have
if the
it.
solution is like suffering and cafeteria banana pudding, he is living the solution. I can attest to that.
It ain't all convertibles in basketball. I'll tell you that right now. Just today.
Well, things here in Virginia are very much heating up for that reason, for the NCAA tournament. People are thinking about nothing else. Of course, they're also heating up because Seculosity is only 2 weeks away. By the time we record again, it will be out there in people's hands, and I'm nervous. I'm excited.
It's very exciting.
It's awesome.
Very,
babe.
I'm sort of impatient. And yeah, in fact, I feel like, every week there's a new gimme in terms of the theme of the book. And this week, it is this college admissions scandal, which is now kind of old news, but it's prompted some wonderful writing. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is what Peggy Noonan had to write in the Wall Street Journal. She wrote a wonderful column called Kids Don't Become Success Robots. And this was what she sort of observed about the college admissions scandal in which a bunch of parents were caught, including a couple Hollywood actors, including Aunt Becky from Full House, as we all know. This is what Peggy Noonan writes. She says, in the past decade or so, I've observed a particular parenting style growing prevalent among the upper middle class and wealthy. It is intense. They love their kids and want the best for them. They want to be responsible, but there's a degree to which one wonders if they don't also see them, their children, as narcissistic extensions of themselves. These parents are hyper-attentive, providing meticulous academic grooming, private schools, private tutors, coaches, lessons in chess and Chinese language and cello. It says they aim their children at the best colleges, which are to them basically brands. The colleges, too, market themselves that way. Well, we are Harvard. Get in there and you're branded too. Noonan writes, I believe a lot of parents do this not only so their children will do well, but so that they will look good. And then in the Atlantic, they interviewed some college sort of academic consultants who said the parents do, in addition to wanting to provide for their children, they want to brag to other parents at the grocery store when they're standing in line. They do want that bumper sticker on the back of their car. Back to Noonan, though. She says they are status monkeys creating success robots, which in one way is odd because their family has already arrived. But there is something sick about America that no matter how much success you have, it's not enough. You must have more, and everyone must know you have it. The kids pick up through cues the family ethos, which is that the purpose of an education is to look good. She sort of finish off. She talks about her experience at Tennessee Tech, but she says, I'll tell you where I saw success robots. A few years ago, I worked for a few months at an Ivy League school. I expected a lot of questions about politics, history, and literature, but that is not what the students were really interested in. What they were interested in, it was almost my first question, and it never abated, was networking. They wanted to know how you network. At first, I was surprised. I'd say, I don't know. That wasn't on my mind. I think it all comes down to work. Then I'd ask, why don't you just make friends instead? And by the end, I was saying, it's a mistake to see people as commodities, as things you can use. Concentrate on the work. They'd get impatient. They knew there was a secret to getting ahead, that it was networking, and that I was cruelly withholding successful strategies. In time, I concluded they'd been trained to be shallow, encouraged to see others as commodities. They didn't think great work would be rewarded. They thought great connections were. And it was what they implicitly had been promised by the school. Get in here and you can network with the cream of the crop, and you'll rise to the top with them. Noonan's closing advice is, do not network. Make friends. Learn about the lives of others. It's a refreshing column that I think, really takes the mask off a lot of the sort of righteousness, in fact, for parents, not just for children. Of course, these parents they worry about their kids' future and they want what's best for them. But we would be lying to ourselves and to other people if we did not acknowledge that the over-identification with one's children and the sort of extent to which the parents, their righteousness is at stake in these things. I mean, that's why people will do whatever it takes, I think, to get into a school like this. And most people I know, at least who are involved in the context that Noonan describes, were not the least bit surprised about this scandal. They were maybe a little bit shocked by the transparency and the way that the images were being photoshopped onto Olympic athletes. But I don't know. RJ, I know you preached about this a little bit, Sarah. I'm sure you have some things to share as a newly minted college chaplain.
I know, right?
Let's hear it. What do you say?
I have a lot of thoughts about this. I was at the grocery store last week in my Yale sweatshirt, which, I went to the divinity school, not to the undergraduate part of Yale, which is way harder to get into. And the guy behind the counter asked, who was at the checkout, asked me if my parents had paid for me to get into Yale. So I'm not wearing that sweatshirt anymore in public. Because it was a weird, it was sort of a weird thing to be confronted with that in the grocery store checkout line. I also think in reading her piece, which I thought was so thoughtful compared to some of the other stuff that came out, it's really hard. Sin always breaks your heart. And sometimes when there are people who, especially people who we see as having more money than us or who are more privileged than us or more power than us, it's really so easy to hate them until you read something like this and you're like, oh my God, they're so desperate and broken. And not that what they've done is that makes it okay, but it really makes it harder to sort of disassociate yourself from their sin. Oh, I would never do that, which I found this piece incredibly moving from that standpoint. I mean, I went to Ole Miss, so this is very...
Go Rebs.
I know, right? This is very foreign to my experience, just because Ole Miss, anybody could get into. I don't know if it's still like that, but it was definitely like that when I was an undergrad. So we had at Ole Miss, I think I've told you guys before, I was a displaced student because I wasn't in a sorority. So I was with all of this whole sorority, and it was full of girls, buxom, beautiful blonde girls. who were all from Texas and they couldn't get into state schools. And so this is where they went. So that was the side of it I saw was I went to school where no one else, like where everyone could get in. And so that's where you ended up.
I will say, reading Noonan's piece, guilty as charged. I got a junior in high school. I've got an 8th grader who, just found out which high schools he got into, as did all of his 8th grade friends, whether they were applying to private high schools or selective public high schools or whatever it was. We actually had a party last Saturday night for all of our families with kids in 8th grade. And this article came out like on the day that we found out what schools he got into. And my wife and older son happened to be on a college visit in North Carolina. So I don't know whether the Justice Department timed this for maximum outrage and effect, but it was right in the middle of that thing in Houston, at least, and I'm sure all across the country, because what schools do, high schools, they let you know where you got in like Friday afternoon before spring break, so that if you are like angry, you basically can't get in touch with the administration for 10 days. It's pretty genius. So I'll just say guilty as charged. There's no question that part of my ego and sense of myself is wrapped up in my kid's success, and I wish it wasn't. But it is, and I fight it, and I pray about it, but it just is. That being said, I watched that viral Lori Loughlin video where she's with her daughter from last year talking about her parenting techniques. Have you guys seen this video? It's like a 45-second video. So it's her and a daughter, and she's like, we just don't push our kids very hard.
Wait, who is this? Is this Aunt Becky?
That's Aunt Becky.
Okay, got it. Okay,
with one of her daughters talking about parenting.
Okay, I'm tracking.
2017.
I'm tracking. Okay.
She's like, we never pushed our kids that hard. We didn't really believe in that. We wanted to give them a lot of freedom to explore and be creative and just go in their playroom and do their thing. And, just do your best. That was our, you do your best.
100%.
Everything's going to work out.
Totally.
And it's just so delicious, the irony. Because I watched that video and I was, outraged and angry, and because I don't have the money to buy my kids into the schools they want to go to, and here I have kids that are trying so hard and working so hard and doing everything they can, and the idea that some other kid is going to get in ahead of my kid is like, ah. But then I watched the video, and of course, everything she said about parenting, I agreed with. Everything she said. And it brought to mind, a certain someone who said, come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And then I was like, but of course she can say that because she's working behind the scenes to make sure that her kids, everything works out perfectly for her kids. And then I'm like, wait, that's exactly like Jesus. Jesus does and is doing the exact same thing. The reason he can say, do not worry, come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, is because just like Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin, we have what Jesus talks about is a divine parent who is powerful and wealthy, who breaks the rules and pays the cost at great personal cost to get his children something they don't deserve and haven't earned.
RJ.
So that
I want you to both write this, and I also want to tell all our listeners to please direct all their hate mail about what RJ said directly to him. Do not include me in the email. Thank you.
But I'm
That's
sorry,
so good,
but it's just true.
It's true.
That all my outrage is totally pharisaical, right? It's about
100%.
how hard my kids have worked, what they deserve, what they've earned. And I'm like, and what does Jesus say? The tax collectors and prostitutes are getting into the kingdom of heaven ahead of you. I read that amazing parable of the unjust manager, the unjust steward, who cancels the bills of the debtors of his master when he gets caught. Mm-hmm. And Robert Farrah Capon says in Kingdom Grace Judgment about that being Jesus, who unjustly cancels. He doesn't just, lower our bills. He cancels them. He rips them up and throws them away. And so, and you talk about, Noonan, Peggy Noonan, it's all about the work. Guess what? No, it's not. The kingdom of God's not all about the work. It actually is not what you know. It actually is who you know. And the good news is that we know the good Father. We know the King who has bought everything for us already with his blood that we don't deserve and could never earn.
Take us to church, RJ.
So there you go.
That's good in the neighborhood, man. That's
good. That's beautiful. What can I say? That is beautiful. I think Yeah, there's not much to be added to that.
Right?
I think that college admissions really are the great measure of upper middle class and middle class righteousness, and for other people it's other things, but that's what there is something, I just got to say it, there is something religious going on when you have, to take it further, RJ, you have admissions officers who are secular priests handing out blessings and
Justifying
curses.
your existence.
Blessings and curses according to the sacrifice that you have made, either through hard work or through finance, and they're in accordance with these divine standards of absolute excellence. In which, and the standard to get into some of these schools is getting closer and closer to like the perfection, as it were. So it's like a second use of the law, not a third use or first use almost. I mean, I worry about it with my own kids just because I had, my dad went to Harvard and his dad went to Harvard and my brother went to Harvard, and like I grew up with that as part of the family mythology, and that was a heavy thing. Even if they never put pressure on me for any of that stuff, but like you grow up with that thinking, oh my gosh, do I have to measure up to that? And at this point, if it's basically impossible to guarantee a spot into Harvard, even if you've got $1 gazillion, even if you've got perfect SAT scores, even if you've got the most amazing essays. I mean, I worry about how just in the here and now, how that law will translate going forward to my own children. Not that I went to an Ivy League school, but I know that it's going to be a lot harder for them to get into this undergrad school I went to than it was for me. And
Honey,
I think
send him to Ole Miss when that happens.
I think so. You sent him to Tennessee Tech.
Exactly.
Well, honestly, I couldn't get over how perfect of a sort of a lead-in this was to this essay that appeared on Ion this week. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ion. How the poor became blessed.
Yeah.
Did you guys read this? Of course you did. Well, I sent it to you. Peter van der Horst, Pieter, almost seems a Dutch academic, wrote this incredible.
You ain't Dutch, you ain't much.
If there's one thing I hate, it's the Dutch.
People who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch.
Oh gosh, we're dating ourselves.
Smoke.
Yeah, well, on that note, he writes about he says ancient Greek moralists didn't admonish people to concern themselves about the fate of the poor. While generosity was praised as a virtue, the poor were never singled out as its object. It was always directed to humans in general, provided that they deserved it. Honor was the driving motive behind Greek beneficence, and therefore it wasn't directed towards the poor, but to fellow humans in general, especially those from whom one could reasonably expect a gift in return. These were the, quote, worthy ones because they acknowledged and respected the principle of reciprocity. It was rather the rich who were seen as the favorites of the divine world, their wealth being the visible proof of that favor. The poor could not pray for the help from the gods because they were poor. This was the implication of the common belief that the poor were morally inferior to the rich. And then he goes on, he says, while care for the poor was a non-item in Greco-Roman antiquity, it is a central concern in the Jewish Bible. Caring for the poor is seen as a major duty and virtue, not only in the Torah of Moses, but also in the prophets and other biblical writings. Most significantly, God is seen as the protector of the poor and the rescuer of the needy. They are his favorites and the objects of his mercy, regarded as humble before God and therefore often as pious and righteous. He says the Torah, as we know, urges Israel to be generous towards the poor in their midst. The prophets warn repeatedly against oppressing the poor and the needy. A day acceptable to the Lord is the day on which the people share their bread with the hungry, bring the poor into their house, and clothe the naked. Yet in spite of the fact that there's much concern for the poor in the Bible, there's still no record of organized charity among Jews of the rabbinic era. It was the Christians who sort of innovated that, at least. It's this guy, it was so funny, he was almost like apologizing for the fact, in classic fashion, apologizing for the fact that Christians actually were the ones who innovated this. I'm like, it's almost like, I'm so sorry to break it to you people. I really wish it weren't true, but it looks like the Christians might be.
We've got some bad news.
They might actually be responsible for charity. And he goes on, he says, the Christians had a system of poor relief right from the start, as indicated in the New Testament. In the earliest phase, when the church was still a Jewish movement in the early 30s, AD, the followers of Jesus in Jerusalem appointed 7 men to oversee the daily distribution of food among the widows in their community. It would seem that organized charity was a Christian innovation from the beginning. And then he closes with that amazing quote from 362 AD, or Common Era, from Julian the Apostate, the emperor, the last pagan emperor of the Roman Empire, who wrote in a letter to a priest in Asia Minor that lots of corn should be distributed to the inhabitants of Galatia, and 1/5 of it should be given to the poor, and the rest to strangers and beggars. Notably, he then adds, "For it is a shame that when no Jew ever has to beg, and the impious Galileans," in other words, the Christians, "support not only their own poor, but ours as well, everyone can see that our people lack aid from us." In the discussion of privilege and how it relates to what people deserve and don't deserve, here we have this remarkable history of the poor that seen as blessed. That is just I don't know. It's a worthy reminder. It's a beautifully stated short 3,000-word essay on maybe something that we can all agree is actually a pretty great thing about our faith, despite its many a lot of the baggage and all the historical problems. Here you have organized charity. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I thought this was amazing. I mean, it's so freeing, right? Like, and I love that I love old family narratives, and it's funny to have read this today because my husband is in Nazareth right now, and I talked to him on the phone, and he's in this convent that they discovered church ruins from the 3rd or 4th century underneath. And I mean, it's so easy to forget that, like, we're so deeply connected to, like, 3rd century Christians. And to know that this is a thing that is innately a part of our DNA as Christians it's just so freeing, because I think it is really tempting in this world. And, one of the pieces we read about the college admission scandal, you said this out loud, that whole thing of, like, there's never enough, right? We never feel like we have enough, especially, like, the richer you are, then the more you're like, oh, I don't know, and it's just so freeing that, like, our hope is in the eternal and that we actually can just give it away and, like, not be held back by all these worldly anxieties. Like, I find that exhilarating. I mean, it's one of the things I think I love most about being Christian, because I think it's very easy, and certainly the world builds us up in this sense of righteousness of giving money. I mean, good Lord, the number of emails I get in a day about, all sorts of things, from digging wells to sex work. And that stuff, I mean, and, that's amazing, worthy things people should be giving money towards. But there's a lot of shoulds around that. And there's something about giving money in a Christian way that's just like, oh, well, this is just what we do, that I love. I love that.
I don't know if I talked about this a year ago. I was looking up what the date was. It reminded me a lot of an episode of Fresh Air. Bart Ehrman was on Fresh Air, which is always like, oh, how's this going to go? But no, he had just come out with this new book, The Triumph of Christianity. And Bart Ehrman and Tara Gross, both of whom are not Christian and kind of anti-Christian, and Terry's kind of trying to egg Bart into talking about the triumph of Christianity. But what Bart Ehrman basically ends up saying is that, for the first 3 centuries, the reason that Christianity spread is because it had an ethic of love, as opposed to the Roman Empire, which had an ethic of power, where if you were a man, you could abuse women because you're more powerful than them, and you could enslave people that you had conquered because you're more powerful than them, and you could mistreat your children because you are more powerful than them. And Christianity comes along and says, no, everyone has value, everyone is loved, we're going to love people, and that 100% of the conversions happened through love with zero coercion or violence at all. That violence was just not even an issue at all until Christianity became, the religion of the empire, when Constantine converted in like the mid-4th century. And even then, Constantine and one of his sort of competing co-emperors signed the first ever freedom of religion treaty in the history of the world.
Right.
It gave people the freedom to worship in the way they wanted to worship. And then, some things after that don't go so well. But it was kind of amazing for Bart Ehrman to say it was love, it was service, it was non-coercion, it was pacifism, and oh, by the way, it was also miracles.
Right.
Everyone always says that the church spread because of miracles, 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 and never does he say, it's fascinating, never does he say, of course we know there's no miracles. He just lays it out there because that's what the early witnesses say. And so it's amazing and beautiful and wonderful. And I'm gonna say something that's gonna be a little bit controversial, but I'm gonna say it. It's why I'm a Christian and why I do actually think at the end of the day, and I'm gonna qualify this, Christianity is better than any other religion.
Ooh.
Christians are not better than the adherents of any other religion.
Probably
We're just
worse.
as sinful. We're just as violent. We're just as hypocritical.
Yeah.
We're just as judgmental, maybe more so. But Christianity, Jesus is better than anybody else. And to me, Exhibit 1 is that, again, for the first 4 centuries, Christianity takes over the Roman Empire without shedding a drop of blood except its own. And that is just fundamentally different from any other religion, and maybe I said this before, Jesus, he never did anything of earthly significance. Never wrote a book, never had any money, never led an army, never held political office, never had any children, had a 3-year ministry.
Never graduated college.
Died the most miserable death that humanity has ever conceived of, utterly alone, deserted by everyone who ever knew him. And yet today he's the most famous person in the history of the world. Like, show me someone else like that. So, and one of the things that makes Christianity great is our unwillingness to coerce other people into what we believe, even though, of course, we do that all the time. But Jesus didn't, and Paul didn't. They just laid it out there. Let him who has ears to hear, let them hear. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like what I'm saying, just kill me.
Right.
I can handle that.
Right.
Because I trust God enough to let you do that.
Right.
So that I do, like I said, I think Christianity is better, but that belief doesn't lead you then to impose your beliefs on other people.
Right.
It means you trust God enough to just lay it out there and suffer the consequences. Even though, of course, I'm terrified to do that, although I kind of just did.
Sarah,
just did.
Sarah, I feel like he's living the solution in front of our eyes
I
right
do,
now.
100%.
It's only because there's no humidity in the air.
It's
That's it. That's all it is.
It's just like, I mean, I say this all the time. I feel like I say this like every other sermon I preach. Like, Christianity is a terrible sales pitch, and I feel like this is like such an accurate. I mean, this tells us it's been a bad sales pitch from the beginning. You know what I mean? That like we're going to take care of poor people. We're going to like do a little organization around that. We're just going to give things to them, and then we're not going to expect anything in return. And no one's ever done this before. You know what I mean? Like, and when I think about doing that now, for middle-class Americans, like that's one thing. I think about 3rd century Christians doing that, and I'm like, it's incredible. I mean, these people didn't have much to begin with.
It's bananas.
Yeah. So, I loved this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it reflects this sort of, upside down. Status gets flipped completely upside down in the way that RJ said. It's not that status doesn't exist. It's that God is the one who has given status. Sometimes I feel like we don't talk enough about the material poor by talking about the poor in spirit, but they're not quite the same thing, though they sometimes are. But there is such a thing as the poor in spirit, and I think a lot of these upper middle class Americans that I spend my life around, and probably might say that that's what I am. And I mean, the poverty of spirit is unbelievably pronounced and deep, and the self-righteousness that can come along with that, the despair that comes along with it, it leads a person to say, well, if there's any hope, it can't be found in this system in which I'm engaged. Maybe there's hope to be found in the complete opposite. The spiritual poverty in which we live and operate right now is a very pronounced and getting more and more pronounced.
Which this is, we'll hit on some of this with Connor's piece, but I do want to say, I think what you're saying is really important, that Christianity also speaks to those, I mean, very clearly Jesus does, to those who are poor in spirit, and that is also ludicrous, that we would have a religion that would speak comfort to those people. I recently have heard that oft used phrase in my denomination that I think is from the newspaper business originally, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I'm always like, who the hell is comfortable?
Yeah, that's the answer. So let's talk. Let's read Connor's piece,
Yes,
okay?
let's.
Because Connor
Yes.
Gwynn, the Reverend Connor Gwynn, chaplain at Stewart Hall School in Stanton, and wonderful gentleman who will be presenting in New York in about 6 weeks. And I just was with him yesterday, and I know what he's going to be talking about. And run, don't walk. But as preparation, listen to a few of the things that we cannot say that he put down in a piece on Mockingbird. And he said, first, many churches have nothing to say to hurting people. It is almost a trite to say that people are hurting. We all know it intellectually. The truth is much more startling. A majority of people are in an incredible amount of pain, emotional, spiritual, physical. In fact, most people are on the verge of falling apart. People are always in a crisis, coming out of a crisis, or heading into a crisis. This is one of the only things in life that we can guarantee to be true. He goes on, he says, Jesus met people at the point of their hurt. In the Gospels, Jesus often named their pain or asked them to name it in the process of healing, as in, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus reached out and touched people at their most fragile point and proclaimed God's presence with them there. When people come to church, they are looking for something or someone to help them with their pain. They are looking for good news and relief. Often, however, as we know, they hear a message of do more for Jesus or care more about X or Y issue. And then he goes on, he says, a growing number of people in our churches are duns, as in like the nuns and the duns. Those who are committed to the church, but have been burned out by the nonstop demands. Jesus did not offer a new system to achieve anything, especially burnout. Jesus came and offered rest. A choking person does not need a lesson in the Heimlich maneuver. They need help. And he says the shrinking mainline denominations often hold our noses up at mega churches that are growing. We chalk it up to smoke machines and production value. What doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that most preachers at booming mega churches are talking about real life and real pain. People may disagree with their theology, but they're clearly saying things that others want and need to hear. Unfortunately, even these massively popular preachers that speak to the real pain of people often stop short of saying the full truth of the gospel, that grace is real, unlimited, and completely unconditional. We cannot say this in our modern call-out culture. When forces seek to destroy people over misdeeds and missteps in their history, it is revolutionary to say that God's love extends right past the wrong thing, the worst thing a person has ever done. Should we name bad deeds and wrongs? Sure. Should we then use those slights and sins to banish people to the outer darkness? Probably not. We are flawed and sinful human beings. Ours is not the condemnation or salvation business. That work belongs to God through Christ, and through Christ that work is finished. I love this final sort of denouement. He says, the good news is not that God so loved the righteous or the good or the ones who stayed within the lines. The good news is that God so loved the world that all who believe in him would have everlasting life. We so want God to be like us, but the gospel is that God is not like us at all. Boom, as they say, goes the dynamite. Connor paraphrases it here, but it's true. Everyone has a problem, lives with a problem, or is a problem. And or if you're not, you're about to.
Right.
And so people would be like, Dave, you guys preach like it's like people are, there's something maudlin or something too dark going on. And there can be a way of being, I think, a little, we can get a little too bound up in sadness or something. But the truth is that everyone actually is in some kind of pain. It might not be on the relativity scale of, hierarchy that we've currently grafted ourselves onto. It may not be as glamorous kind of pain, but it's real pain. And it's and if we deny people that there's just nothing, why go to church? As he says, if you're really just giving people tips to improve their bodies or their performance, then they should just go to the gym on Sunday mornings. And that's why, in fact, I think a lot of gyms are doing so well and so packed on Sunday mornings. #seculosity.
#seculosity.
It really is true. You start to preach to people and as though they're in pain, even if they can't admit it or they're not willing to go there. But then all of a sudden, the 1 week that things have gone so badly that they cannot avoid it any longer, they fall apart and they come back, and God's grace is right there, and Jesus is broken for them in the in the body and blood there and the altar and stuff. It's extremely moving and powerful.
I don't think we believe in true healing anymore, and I think that's a huge problem. I don't think we think about healing anymore, like healing, the kind of healing that Jesus does in the Gospels. And I think we don't think about it because we don't think we need to be healed from anything. And I think sometimes the chief of sinners is the people who've gone to seminary. I mean, I think a lot, we're trained, that these are all the techniques you learn to protect yourself and you won't get hurt and you won't do this. And then you definitely, I said in that room, that I start with that Steve Brown, the way he starts every sermon. He says, we pray for the one who preaches. And I, of course, say, for her sins are many. And somebody stopped me. He was like, wait, you say that like before every sermon? And I was like, yeah, man. Like I need to be reminded that like I need to be healed in the midst of this. But there's this profound anxiety when we preach this way that people think that people won't do things, that they won't fix things, that they won't change the world, that they won't care about stuff, that they'll just be like complicit. And my experience, and
what are they doing right now?
Exactly.
That was what Wesley said. He's like, if you preach this, people are going to go have drink and have sex and sin. He's like, what are they doing now?
Right.
Like we're all complicit now. We're all doing nothing now.
Right.
We're all anxious now. Like it's not working, people.
But I think it is those places, and RJ, maybe you can speak to this, but where people preach the most about our need for healing, the most about our need for redemption from sin, that I see people do incredibly generous, in the name of the piece that we read, Christian work for those who are poor, for those who are suffering, because out of our gratefulness comes great mercy. And if we could capture that, oh my word. But, no, we got a to-do list to hand out to folks.
A couple of quotes, couple great quotes came to mind. One was Richard Baxter, 17th century Anglican reformer, who said that people said of him that he preached as a dying man to dying men. And that's we're scared to do it, but that's what it is. Like we're all dying, and everyone out there is dying. And again, what I see, D.T. Niles a few weeks ago, one beggar telling another beggar where he found bread, but you got to believe you're a beggar, and you got to believe you're preaching to beggars.
Yes.
Or the Reverend Leander Harding, who's one of my professors at Trinity, who said, when you look out on your congregation on Sunday morning, you need to recognize that most everyone there has walked over broken glass, to get there that morning. And I think just it all starts with seeing your people differently. Which
RJ, you are so good at talking. Like RJ has talked me through sermons. That
Thanks,
you're
Sarah.
such a gift. No, it's true.
No, but it comes across in the tone of the preaching.
Yeah.
If the pastor's standing above the people or with them in the midst of it and actually believes it for themselves, that they don't have to say it. They don't have to go through all of the terrible things they've done, but you could tell. You can just tell. And Rutger, for all of your many faults and foibles, I think
all
you
the banana
actually
pudding you eat and you look 28.
You do. That does come across. And you can't fake it. And I think it's.
I do. I don't. Man, I do. I love me some gospel, and I love me some people. But I also I love me some St. Martin's Episcopal Church too. The people there are good, and we do have an incredibly generous congregation. And I don't know what the exact fruit is. I can't draw a straight line. And of course, the minute you try, it's like you're trying to control something that you can't control.
Right.
Whereas you just need to trust that the word of God will not return to him empty. You throw it out there. But what I feel like I do see is, people maybe showing up a little bit more frequently, them having maybe sort of like a freedom and a peace and I hate to use this word, but like genuineness. And they're not so scared to talk about reality anymore. They don't feel like they need to have a separate church personality and like everyday personality. It's like they can bring their actual self to church. And there's something so good about that, that they become more integrated, to use your dad's word, Dave. They become less split.
They can assimilate the negativity.
The boys can come out of the basement, all the Pauls, all the PZ-isms. But it is true. It is true. And they start wearing jeans to church. or not, or they wear whatever they want to wear, and that is so nice to see, and you can kind of feel it in a congregation as well, where there's a sense of togetherness and love and freedom and so
the one thing I think that Connor's piece doesn't address, and it's not meant to address, but I think there are plenty of people at this point in the culture that it's not that they went to church and found that they weren't getting what they wanted or they weren't hearing enough mercy. It's like it doesn't even occur to them that they would go to church and hear anything that has to do with their actual lives. That that they think God is an abstraction, and they think real the anthropology you actually find outside the church is much higher, I think, or tends to be just as high. It just is like, we can change. Yes, we can. All this stuff, you deal with that in
you can do it
in other ways. And I think that some people think that, maybe they're done with church because they're so sick of the demands of church. Maybe they're also done with church because it wouldn't even occur to them to think about life as tragic, because they're spending all of their days involved in systems like wealth accumulation, which are all designed to basically deny death and any kind of weakness. And so I think the church is like there's like an irrelevance that is becoming more and more baked into certain type of secularism, that it is not irrelevant because everyone is dying. But if you really are spending all of your time trying to forget that, and you go to church and you're reminded that you're going to die, you're like, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to hear about that. I'm also reminded, and the other thing I'd say is that, over the years, especially at these mainline churches that are at Episcopal Church where I go, and people are very, they look great on Sunday. And sometimes I feel like they look too good. I wish our church had more, just a total slobs out there. But sometimes you're like, well, how is this message connecting with these people who seem to, they look good. And then as I'm here at a place for 8 years,
it's just appearances.
Every single person, it's like without exception, the people that I thought were either sort of a Tom Bombadil unfallen, things came easily to, I find out that they actually have another child that no one knows about with another person. I find out that their sister died when they were young. I find out that there was sexual abuse, and like without exception. And that's why they're actually in church. Even if I want to ascribe to them some sort of upper middle class desire to be accepted and liked, and this is just what we do as Christians. In fact, the people that are there and really coming and listening are the ones that you find out without exception are in pain, and their pain is being addressed, and not by you, the preacher, but by God through you. Anyway.
And I want to say something about that too, because let's face it, right? In mainline churches, and maybe the Episcopal Church in particular, is known for being kind of uppity. Is that fair to say? Like Frozen Chosen, looking beautiful, like wealthy people. And I think sometimes the problem is that priests can hate their people.
Oh,
they can look out. They can look out and be like, that was me. I remember my first job in ministry. I was working at this wealthy church in sort of suburban Bay Area, California, and I went to go meet with my rector. And granted, I grew up in New Canaan, Connecticut, which is a wealthy little bedroom community, and I graduated from Berkeley and like very privileged, but also very self-righteous. And walked into my senior pastor as a Presbyterian church, and I basically said, "How can you stand to be here? All these wealthy people driving all these fancy cars, and they don't care about anything. Gosh, it must be such a struggle for you." And because I know all about it, I just came from Berkeley, and I'm super smart and very sensitive.
Young RJ sounds fun.
Oh, so fun! And he looked at me and he said, "RJ, you have two problems. One is that you have no respect for people, and the second is you still think money matters." And I wept in his office that day. But I never forgot it because he was 100% correct. Mm-hmm. That money doesn't really sort of matter at the end of the day, and it doesn't exempt anyone from the pain and suffering of life. Yeah. And so I think getting past appearances, Dave, that's what you're talking about, getting past what you think people are like, what you think they have together, what you think they should be able to do with all the privilege they have, and recognize that they're just a poor, slobby, suffering sinner.
Yeah, but it's ironic
everybody
because a
else.
lot of times the people that are saying, I just want more authenticity in the church, and they actually the one coming judging the hell out of the people that look fancy and like who are actually in serious pain as well. And it's just but they're get judged in return. And it's this big sloppy mess of humanity.
I want to say this. So I am leaving this job at St. Martin's. I've been there 4 years. I don't get to preach a lot on Sunday mornings because I'm with my children at my husband's church, but I have preached very regularly at the Wednesday services, which has been a huge gift to me because my dream my whole life before I met my husband was to have a church in Mississippi with 40 people on a Sunday. And I get to have that on Wednesdays at St. Martin's without having to worry about keeping the lights on. So I have gotten all these really sweet notes from people who come to that service very faithfully because they know me. And one of them is from a guy named Jim, who I know RJ knows. And I won't read all of it, but he said this. You are a great preacher and sure to be even better. Your message of God's love, forgiveness, and blessing was really important to me. Even more was reminding me that salvation comes from God and I can do nothing on my own. What a relief. Even at 77, I'm still dealing with this. Takes a long time to overlay that which was introduced in the most formative years.
Wow.
That's it, y'all. That's all I needed.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, let's let Jim have the final word. To both of you, I think in a couple weeks we'll actually be at Tyler, Sarah, and you and I can talk in person. RJ, we'll miss you.
Thanks for the invite.
Sort of. If you want to drive over and record with us that day, that'd be awesome. Let me think.
I think I'm gonna be on a college visit with one of my sons. So. Fulfilling all righteousness. I'm not joking, actually. I'll be preaching at St. Thomas Fifth Avenue in New York City on an evening song on Sunday, April 7th or something. So if there are any
Y'all go.
New York City people, love to see you.
Oh,
It's gonna be
wow.
all law, so get ready.
That's right. I'm gonna hammer you.
Well, to both of you, I just am so grateful for you, and I hope that you have a blessed week, I guess. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by the Narrativo Group, and if you like what you've heard, please do drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Until next time.
Praise the Lord.